In the quiet hum of a high-risk gear factory, Navy SEAL Lieutenant Mark Thompson and his team walked the floor on a routine safety inspection. Machinery clanked. Lights flickered. The air hung heavy with tension, an unspoken awareness that danger was always close in places like these. Mark, the team lead, tapped at his tablet, noting minor issues, scanning the machinery with trained eyes. His unit moved with precision, checking gauges, logging faults, ensuring protocols were followed. It felt like just another day. But what they didn't know was that death was already in the room with them. Disaster strikes. Then, it happened. A deafening boom shattered the silence. The ground buckled, metal screamed. Flames erupted from deep inside the factory, roaring to life like a monster awakened. The blast hurled Mark across the concrete floor. Pain exploded through his body. A massive steel beam crashed down on his leg, trapping him. The factory became a war zone. Smoke choked the air. Shards of steel and glass rained from the ceiling. Machinery twisted. Walls groaned. Screams of terror echoed through the chaos. Mark tried to move, but he couldn't. His body refused. The fire was closing in, fast. He was alone, trapped, dying. It started like any other inspection. A regular safety walkthrough in a high-risk gear factory. Navy SEAL Lieutenant Mark Thompson led his team down narrow corridors, lined with grinding machines and exposed wiring. The factory was loud, machines clanking, gears grinding, pressure valves hissing. But it wasn't the noise that unsettled Mark. It was the silence beneath it. The quiet tension of a place filled with hazardous materials, waiting for one wrong spark. Mark tapped away at his tablet, eyes sharp. His team moved with clockwork. Precision, checking systems, noting malfunctions, double-checking safety protocols. They'd done this dozens of times. But this day was different. Pause. Tone shifts darker. Just as they approached the final inspection zone, the world exploded. A flash. A roar. A force like a freight train hit the team, ripping the floor from under them. Steel twisted. Glass shattered. A massive fireball erupted from the heart of the factory. Mark was thrown off his feet, his body slammed hard into the concrete. Pain shot through him like electricity. Then came the heat. It was unbearable, like the sun had fallen into the building. His lungs fought to breathe. His ears rang from the blast. And before he could process the chaos, a heavy steel beam collapsed, pinning his leg to the ground. Slower, intense delivery. He couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely think. All around him panic. Screams from workers trapped in the inferno. Flames danced closer, painting everything in orange and red. The factory was collapsing piece by piece. Mark's training screamed, "Stay calm, assess, move." But his body refused. The smoke thickened. His vision blurred. The heat, it was eating him alive. His teammates were gone, thrown in different directions. He was alone, crushed, trapped. Long pause, then soft whisper, and just as the fire began to kiss the edges of his uniform, just as his lungs filled with smoke, just as he began to fade into unconsciousness, help came, a new force. A heartbeat running toward the fire, not away from it. She didn't wear a uniform. She didn't carry a weapon. But she was about to save a Navy SEAL's life. As fire devoured the walls of the factory, and smoke blackened the sky above, people screamed, ran, panicked. But one person didn't run away. She ran toward it. Her name was Sarah Williams. A trauma nurse. Off-duty, no protective gear. Just a deep instinct to save lives, no matter the risk. She had just stepped out of the clinic when the ground shook beneath her feet. A deep boom echoed through the street. And then black smoke rising like a nightmare in daylight. Most people stood frozen. Some ran, but not Sarah. She sprinted. Heart racing, legs burning. No plan, no backup. Just one mission in her mind. Someone inside needs me. She reached the gates of the factory security guards, yelling at her to stay back. But she didn't hear them. Or maybe she did, and ignored them anyway. She ran into the fire. Inside, the scene was hell. Steel collapsing, wires sparking, heat so intense it felt like it could melt bone, and then she saw him, a man in uniform, face covered in ash, leg trapped beneath a metal beam. Lieutenant Mark Thompson. He wasn't moving. Blood soaked through his pants. His lips barely parted with each fading breath. Sarah knelt beside him. Checked for a pulse. It was there, but faint. She called out, "Help! I need help over here." 2 factory workers ran toward her, coughing, terrified. They didn't ask questions. Together, they lifted the beam inch by inch until it slid free. But Mark was unconscious, heavy, too heavy for one person to carry. Still, she tried. She pulled his arm over her shoulder, braced herself, and stood. His weight nearly buckled her knees. But she held on. Step after step, through smoke, through flame. With every breath, she felt like collapsing. But she didn't stop. She carried him outside, and the moment they crossed that factory threshold, she collapsed. Medics rushed in. Sirens wailed. And Mark? He was still alive. Barely. Because a nurse ran into fire when no one else would. Soft ending line. Sometimes heroes don't carry guns. They carry hearts big enough to carry others. The hospital lights were blinding white. Monitors beeped in rhythm. Machines breathed for him now. Lieutenant Mark Thompson was alive, but barely. Burns across his chest, broken ribs, a crushed leg that may never work again. Doctors weren't sure he'd make it through the night, but she was there. Sarah, the nurse who pulled him from fire, now sat by his bedside. Every single day. She wasn't assigned to him. She didn't have to be there, but she was. Even after her shifts ended. Even after the headlines faded. She stayed. She'd sit in the chair by his bed, hold his hand through the sedation, and whisper, "You're not alone, I'm still here." The first time he opened his eyes, he didn't even know where he was. His voice was dry. His body barely moved, and yet when he turned his head, she was the first person he saw. "Am I dead?" he asked. Sarah smiled gently. "No, Mark, you're alive, you made it." And in that moment he cried, not because of the pain, not because of the burns, but because someone cared enough to stay. Pause. Recovery was brutal. Weeks of surgeries. Months of therapy. Mark had to relearn how to stand, how to walk, how to breathe without a machine. And through it all, Sarah never left. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was his anchor. They shared meals in silence, laughed at awful hospital food, watched the sunrise from his window together, and something unspoken grew between them. Not romance, not yet, but something deeper than words. Gratitude, respect, a bond forged in fire and rebuilt in quiet hours of healing. One night, long after visiting hours, Mark whispered, "Why me? Why did you save me?" Sarah looked at him, eyes tired, but soft. "Because I could. Because you were there. And I don't walk away." Silence filled the room. That's when Mark knew this wasn't just about survival anymore, that it was about redemption. Recovery wasn't a straight line. For Lieutenant Mark Thompson, it was a mountain with no summit. Every day brought new pain. A muscle that wouldn't respond. A leg that refused to bear weight. Memories that hit like lightning in the dark. PTSD didn't wait for a formal invitation. It barged in, unwelcome, unrelenting. Some nights he'd wake up gasping, sweat pouring, still hearing the explosion, still feeling the fire. Sarah would come running, sometimes just to sit, sometimes to hold his hand. She never asked questions. She never tried to fix it. She just stayed. But even she couldn't protect him from the letter. One afternoon, a white envelope was delivered to his room. Official, cold, stamped with the seal of the United States military. He knew what it was before he opened it. Discharge papers, medical retirement, effective immediately. He stared at it in silence, his entire identity, his career, his purpose. Gone with a single sheet of paper. The soldier who once led men into battle would now leave through a hospital door, on crutches. That night he didn't speak. He didn't eat. Didn't even look up when Sarah came in. She saw the letter on the floor. She didn't pick it up. She just sat down next to him and whispered, "I know it hurts, but this doesn't define you." Mark finally looked at her, eyes full of rage and grief. "I used to matter," he said. "I used to be someone." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "You still matter, Mark. You're still someone. You didn't lose your strength, you just found a new kind." He turned away and cried, not because he was weak, but because he was letting go of everything he thought he was. Soft ending tone. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought with bullets or bombs. They're fought in silence, in stillness, in hospital beds, with broken bones and broken hearts. But even then, a single voice, a single person who believes in you, can change everything. Weeks passed. Mark's body was healing. But something else began to shift, his spirit. He started walking without crutches. Just a few steps at first, then down the hallway, then outside. Every stride was a battle won. But the real victory? He started showing up. For others. One morning, Sarah found him sitting in the rehab waiting room with another injured veteran. A young man barely 22, missing a leg, eyes hollow. Future uncertain. Mark wasn't talking at him. He was just listening. No judgment, no lectures. Just being present. Later that day, Sarah asked, "You thinking of becoming a counselor?" "Now." Mark chuckled, his first real laugh in months. "Maybe not a counselor," he said, "but maybe I still have something to give." And that was the moment. The turning point. Mark didn't want pity. He didn't want to be remembered as the soldier who almost died. He wanted to serve again, differently, but just as deeply. He applied to a veteran support group as a mentor, started volunteering at rehab centers, even showed up at high schools to talk about mental health, resilience, and hope. He didn't hide his scars. He showed them, because now they had meaning. One evening, after a long day at the VA center, he stood outside the hospital where it all began. The factory was gone, rebuilt, but the memory remained. Sarah stood beside him, hands in her coat, pockets quiet. "You ever think," Mark said, "if you hadn't been there that day?" She cut him off gently. "No, don't finish that sentence." He looked at her, confused. "I was meant to be there," she said. "Not just to pull you out, but to remind you who you are." A long pause. Then Mark whispered, "Thank you." And Sarah, eyes glassy, replied, "You saved me too." Soft fade out, because sometimes saving someone from fire isn't just about pulling them out of flames. It's about walking beside them until they find their fire again. Weeks passed. Mark's body was healing, but something else began to shift, his spirit. He started walking without crutches. Just a few steps at first, then down the hallway, then outside. Every stride was a battle won. But the real victory? He started showing up. For others. One morning, Sarah found him sitting in the rehab waiting room with another injured veteran. A young man barely 22, missing a leg, eyes hollow. Future uncertain. Mark wasn't talking at him. He was just listening. No judgment, no lectures. Just being present. Later that day, Sarah asked, "You thinking of becoming a counselor?" "Now?" Mark chuckled, his first real laugh in months. "Maybe not a counselor," he said, "but maybe I still have something to give." And that was the moment. The turning point. Mark didn't want pity. He didn't want to be remembered as the soldier who almost died. He wanted to serve again, differently, but just as deeply. He applied to a veteran support group as a CIS mentor, started volunteering at rehab centers, even showed up at high schools to talk about mental health, resilience, and hope. He didn't hide his scars. He showed them, because now they had meaning. One evening, after a long day at the VA center, he stood outside the hospital where it all began. The factory was gone, rebuilt, but the memory remained. Sarah stood beside him, hands in her coat, pockets quiet. "You ever think," Mark said, "if you hadn't been there that day?" She cut him off gently. "No, don't finish that sentence." He looked at her confused. "I was meant to be there," she said. "Not just to pull you out, but to remind you who you are." A long pause. Then Mark whispered, "Thank you." And Sarah, eyes glassy, replied, "You saved me too." Soft fade out, because sometimes saving someone from fire isn't just about pulling them out of flames. It's about walking beside them until they find their fire again. The explosion, the fire, the fight, it was all behind them now. But the journey they began that day, that journey was only just unfolding. Mark and Sarah weren't just survivors. They were symbols. Symbols of resilience, loyalty, and hope. In the months that followed, they continued their work. Together, Mark mentoring veterans, Sarah leading new initiatives to protect healthcare workers and patients. Their story spread. It inspired communities. It sparked conversations about courage, sacrifice, and the power of standing up for what's right. But more than that, they found something rare. Connection. Two worlds collided: military and medicine. Two lives intertwined by fate and forged in fire. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, hard days, moments of doubt, but they had each other. A bond unbreakable, born from trust and shared struggle. As they stood side by side, looking out at the future, they understood something fundamental. True strength is not just about surviving the storm. It's about helping others find their way through it. Their story became a legacy, not just of what they endured, but of what they gave back. A legacy of courage, of selflessness, of love. And for anyone listening today, remember this: no matter how dark the hour, no matter how fierce the battle, there is always hope. Because heroes walk among us, in hospitals, on battlefields, and in the hearts of those who refuse to give up. Thank you for joining this journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories of courage and hope. And tell us, what does heroism mean to you? Even after Mark's physical wounds began to heal, he and Samantha both realized that the real battle was far from over, the battle that no one could see. Every night, Mark's mind was haunted by the memories, the blast, the fire, the helplessness of being trapped. PTSD wasn't just a word to him. It was a daily struggle. When the world grew quiet, the past screamed loudest. Samantha, too, carried invisible scars beneath her calm and steady exterior. The weight of every life she saved, and the one she couldn't, rested heavily on her heart. Sometimes the emotional burden was almost too much to bear, but together they found strength. They shared their stories, their fears, and their hopes. In leaning on each other, they discovered that healing wasn't just about the body, it was about the heart and mind as well. Their experience opened their eyes to a larger truth. There were countless others fighting silent battles, struggling without support. Samantha became a fierce advocate for nurses and healthcare workers, pushing for better funding, safer working conditions, and crucial mental health resources. Mark used his military background to raise awareness among veterans groups, speaking openly about the importance of mental health care, reintegration, and community support. Together, they launched a foundation, a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. A platform where voices too often ignored could finally be heard. Their mission was clear: no hero should ever have to fight alone. Their story inspired many. Patients, veterans, nurses, families from all walks of life came together. Support groups formed. Fundraisers were held, and awareness campaigns launched. Communities united. Barriers broke down. From the ashes of tragedy grew a powerful movement, built on trust, loyalty, and a shared determination to protect and uplift one another. Mark and Samantha witnessed how shared struggles forged unbreakable bonds. As months passed, Mark and Samantha's lives settled into a new rhythm, one shaped by purpose and connection. Mark no longer saw himself just as a soldier or survivor. He found a deeper meaning in helping others heal, in using his experiences to bring about change. Samantha's work continued to inspire those around her. She wasn't just a nurse anymore, she was a symbol of resilience and compassion, a leader who fought not just for her patients, but for the people who cared for them. Together, they built more than just a friendship, they built a partnership, rooted in trust and respect. They supported each other through the lingering shadows of trauma, and celebrated every small victory on the path to healing. Their bond reminded everyone that even after the darkest storms, new beginnings are possible. Life wasn't without its challenges. Though Mark and Samantha had grown close, they both knew healing was not a straight path. There were days when the memories overwhelmed them, when Mark struggled with nightmares of the explosion, and Samantha felt the weight of every life she couldn't save. But they faced those moments together, offering each other strength when the burdens felt too heavy. Their friendship became a safe haven, a place where vulnerability was met with understanding, not judgment. They learned that true courage wasn't just about bravery in the face of danger. It was about facing your own fears and healing wounds you cannot see. Realizing how many healthcare workers and veterans struggled in silence, Mark and Samantha became powerful advocates for change. Samantha tirelessly campaigned for better nurse staffing, safer hospitals, and improved mental health resources. Mark used his military connections to push for more comprehensive veteran support programs, fighting stigma around mental health. Together, their voices grew louder, bringing attention to issues often ignored, and inspiring others to stand up for what mattered most. They showed that when individuals come together, even the toughest systems can be challenged. The journey wasn't easy, especially when it came to rebuilding trust in themselves and the world around them. For Mark, accepting help was a new experience, one that challenged his military training of self-reliance. For Samantha, learning to set boundaries while giving her all was a delicate balance. But step by step, they learned to forgive themselves for the pain they carried, and to embrace the healing power of community and connection. They found hope not just in survival, but in the promise of a future shaped by compassion. As their friendship deepened, Mark and Samantha realized their bond was something rare and precious. More than gratitude or loyalty, it was a profound connection forged through fire, hardship, and shared purpose. They began dreaming of a future together, one where their experiences could fuel lasting impact. Whether working side by side to improve healthcare, or simply being there for each other in the quiet moments, they knew they were stronger together. Their story was no longer just about survival, it was about hope, resilience, and the power of standing united against any challenge.